Welcome, everyone. It is my honor and pleasure to have the amazing Eric Mosley from Black Mat Yoga NYC, as well as the Director of Community Outreach across the Kaivalya Yoga Method Academy and Alana K programs. He's an amazing human being who is going to chat with us today about how we can bring more diversity, inclusivity, acceptance into our wellness spaces. This is something that I'm doing my best be to be on the listening end and learning end. And Eric is someone who I greatly admire in his knowledge and ability to help me and others with this. And I thought it would be wonderful to bring him into the podcast today so that we can all start to raise that vibration, expectation, do better, be more inclusive, because of course this is what yoga stands for. Yoga is inclusivity. It is about making sure everyone feels accepted in these spaces. And there's always going to be room for us to elevate that. So Eric, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. What a wonderful intro. I'm like, okay, yes.
It was easy. That was all easy part.
Okay.
So I'd love to start the conversation. There are many questions that I have and many directions we can go. The people who listen to this podcast are generally identify as modern mystics and spiritual leaders. So we're likely going to be teaching yoga classes. We may or may not own a studio. I'm hoping that everybody listening has put on their business hat and has some kind of business presence, hopefully maybe online. What are some things that we can do? Let's just start with the basics, teaching in a studio, teaching communities, people, groups of students. What are some things that we could keep in mind, think about to create more inclusivity in these spaces?
Yeah, I think the first thing to think about is your own experience with wellness, right? So for so many of us, our either yoga or tarot, whatever our wellness experience is so positive, right? And we know the power and the value that it brings to our lives, and we want to share that with everyone else. And I think specifically, if you are a white person or a person who does not identify as a person of color, it's so important to think about how great or to think about your experience and the things that are the most memorable for you in that. And I think that's what we do naturally and inherently. Those are the things that we want to share and either duplicate or provide access for everyone to tap into the things that we've experienced or to be able to create their own experience. So I think that's like where people feel generally comfortable, what people feel comfortable doing. And then I think if you are a white person, it is so important for you to also think about, okay, what are some barriers that might prevent others from feeling this,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that is the difficult part, particularly when I have these conversations with white people. That's the part that's most difficult. And then that's when we start to get into terms that people have varying levels of comfort with, right? Like white fragility or white privilege, or these things that can feel like indictments to white people who may or may not have had an active role in perpetuating that from what they believe. And that's where things can become uncomfortable. And that's where that's where our like defenses and our ego kind of step in. So I would encourage anyone who is creating space for someone else. And if we truly are looking to cross racial lines and ethnic lines, then like that is part of our responsibility. And the good thing is that yoga and wellness gives us all the tools in order to do that. So like when I reflect on who,
Very
like,
handy.
right, right. When I think about the awareness that I'm able to have within myself, that also gives me like I can practice some detachment there, and knowing that like I'm aware of X, Y, and Z about me, and I can also kind of detach from that a little bit and know that that may not be true for the next person, right? Someone may have had a harmful experience, and I need to do my due diligence to either know that I don't really know what to do next and let me seek out someone and pay them
Yeah.
or like let me seek out someone to try to figure out some next steps for me and what this means for me and my community. And or it means like let me do my own research and like become better knowledge solely for, if not for my own understanding to be better, but like as a business person, let me at least be knowledged enough so I know I have an understanding of what is real, whether or not it's my experience or not. So I think that would be the place to start, is like figure out where you are on this spectrum,
Yeah.
figure out what your experience has been, and then look for other experiences, right? Like
Yeah.
someone that is not yours, or look for experiences for people of color, because I promise you, it is so easy to find. And it is not a secret that people of color, particularly Black people and people of like the yogic tradition, right? Like
Yeah.
Indian people who identify as Indian or South Asian, right? Feel some contention oftentimes when they're coming into very white wellness spaces. Um, and those experiences are not super unique, and they are not hard to find. So I
Right.
think if you're looking to hold space for people, then at minimum research within yourself to know where you are showing up, and then look for other experiences that you can learn from, because they're not hard to find.
I think that one of the, maybe it's almost like a catch-22 or a pitfall that we have in the yoga and spiritual industry, is that, you know, it is so full of beneficence and joy, and we're here to be the spreaders of love and light, and I've got air quotes going, right?
Right.
And that we, you know, we believe in inclusivity. We believe that everyone should be accepted. And, you know, we've never quote put up barriers to acceptance. So, you know, why would there be a feeling of lack of acceptance? I would describe it for myself as blindness, white blindness, that, you know, because we live in this space of, oh, it should be so inclusive and so accepting, it's really hard unless we have that mirror put up to us to even imagine that there would be others, people who don't feel included. I think if we really think about that, and I know that this is true for me, if I really sit and think, like, God, I can imagine that there are people of color, indigenous people, disabled people, um, people from, you know, different walks of life who might look at a yoga class and not feel comfortable coming in. And if I really think about that, what would it be like for me to not feel comfortable? It is heartbreaking. And I know that I want to do everything I can to truly be accepting in the ways that I think we are being much more aware of at this time in our history. That this mirror that we have so needed for so long is finally being put up to us. And I think we may actually have to work a little bit harder in the spiritual and yoga industries to realize that there are barriers to folks feeling comfortable and able to come into the spaces. And the good news is that if we're willing to do the work, yoga is here to be available, accepted, you know, to be inclusive. And it's like, as long as we can do the work individually, wow, like, you know, we have a beautiful place to create for everybody to feel welcome.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you hit on something really significant there, is that you didn't say this, but what I'm hearing and what I'm kind of extracting is like, it really is like white people really have to step up to the plate on this one, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Like for white people to, for you to say it's so difficult or it's heartbreaking for me to know that people don't feel welcome. I, as a Black person, feel two ways when I engage in this conversation with white people. It's that like I'm grateful to hear you say that, right? To acknowledge that it's you feel empathetic, or you feel painful, or you feel disappointed knowing that people don't feel welcome. And it also feels like, duh, like this is what we have been saying, like of course we feel this way, and people have been saying this, and you can read it, you can find it, or you can just kind of look at the swath of your population, and if you see, it, people of color are underrepresented oftentimes in wellness, and it's not because they just don't like wellness, right? It's not because like Black people just don't want to do yoga, or like Latinx people just don't like to breathe deeply. There's a reason. And what I've also been realizing in being able to interact, especially during COVID, being able to interact with other people of color in wellness spaces, that we oftentimes are doing the same things, right? Like we oftentimes want to create spaces in which people feel welcome. There's just this general kind of through line of we are trying to do something, we are acting because there's a need, right? Because people don't feel seen or welcome in, generally. It's kind of like the general understanding. If you look at like Black yoga teachers, I'm sure you're gonna see in their profile somewhere that's like diversity, like everybody's welcome, to really kind of hit home. So it is both, grounding and restorative to hear that the desire to create these spaces is there. And it's kind of like, well, where has it been? Like we go through these processes, like, well, now you have no choice, but like, where has it been, or why wasn't it important before? And I think that's the part that is tough too for everyone, right? Especially if you are a person who has had a wellness space before now. It's like, well,
why wasn't it present before? Yeah, why was there a barrier before? That's,
right.
and it is tough to take a look at that, and I think that whether we're dealing with this topic of conversation, or whether we're just dealing with, and I don't mean to trivialize it, but what I want to do is compare it with an experience that people may have had previously in their spiritual practice, where when we're doing a spiritual practice and we have a breakthrough, oftentimes we think, how did we not have that breakthrough before? How did we ever not see that? And it's through the work, the tapas, if we might use that term, of spiritual practice, that we finally kind of crack through our density, crack through our blindness, as I like to call it, to see that, it should have always been there, but I don't know, at the very least, we're here now and we can do something about it now. Absolutely, I agree with you. And it where was it? Yes.
Yeah. And then the other thing, bringing it back to the practice, is that I think, and you also mentioned, like, as wellness and spiritual leaders, oftentimes we are the ones who are bringing the love and light, in air quotes, and the healing that feels good. And we all know that healing doesn't always feel good, right? Healing is always good, but it doesn't always feel good. And there are times, whether it's a broken bone, that process of like pain and the pain that comes with healing, or any kind of healing process, you are going to experience discomfort. So I think part two, or the next step after acknowledging where you are and where you've been, and like kind of coming to terms with that, is like leaning into the discomfort of healing and knowing that it's for the greater good, right? Absolutely. And I think that so many people, we're trying to avoid that part of the process, or we are straying away from it because it doesn't feel good. And now I have to reconcile some feelings that are not love and light, that don't feel the same way. And we also have to lean into that and know that that is necessary also to heal. Like, you might, we got to go there. We have to go there.
Of course we have to go there. That is really, in my mind, that is a hallmark of spiritual practice. Mm-hmm. We are not doing the spiritual work if we are not leaning into the sharp edges. That was one of the first most important lessons I was taught as a young yogi, was to lean into the sharp edges, because that is where true transformation lies. I think one of the things that I lean on regularly, no matter what I'm talking about, discussing, teaching about, are the principles, the foundational principles of yoga. And what it's ultimately meant to do for us is to help us recognize and resolve our triggers and our issues, by doing that shadow work, by getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, leaning into those sharp edges. And that's where you create the space for, greater open heart, greater open mind. The things that yoga is actually good at providing for us, which the best thing that yoga can do for us is help us to make really excellent choices for ourselves every day.
Yeah.
It's called viveka, discernment. And when we have done enough practice to start to clear away some of our blind spots, to start to recognize where our discomfort is, we can start to make really excellent choices that help us to lean toward the light. So one of the hallmarks, I think, as a white person, of white fragility is how very comfortable it is. I had one person remark to me once, well, you know, the world is white. And until that was said to me, I'd never really seen it that way because, right, my worldview is very much within this white fragility space. This is the culture in which I was raised. It is very comfortable to do the work of leaning into racial justice, social justice for people who are sitting in this white fragility space. It is very uncomfortable, but it is what will allow us to actually make the best choices. It is
Yeah.
the place from which we can see how we can create truly inclusive environments. It is the way in which we can realize our blind spots, how we may not have demonstrated clearly that, of course, we are here for everyone. Of course, we want people to feel included. Where we fell down on that job,
Yeah.
we have to lean into the sharp edges. We have to get uncomfortable. That's the only way spiritual work is done. And that is the only way this work will be done,
Yeah.
I think.
I agree. I'm with you. Yeah.
Awesome. So about those sharp edges.
About the sharp edges. About to
Yeah.
lean in.
We've got to lean in, you know, and I think that it is okay, at least I hope it's okay. I'm almost like checking in with you on this. I think it's okay for those of us in the wellness space to recognize that we may not have done our best job.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we may not have done our best job. I would say that it's probably not too late, and it's a great time. There's so much education and support right now, um, to do a better job.
Yeah.
You know, and don't we want to do better? Don't we want to really stand up for what we believe in terms of yoga, you know, and really make it as inclusive as possible? And it's okay, you know, if we didn't do as good of a job, there's still time. There's still
Yeah.
time. We can like get to it. Lean against that sharp edge. Do it now.
I'm with you. Yeah.
Awesome. So along those lines, Eric, you know, are there, I like to get practical as much as possible. You know, what
Sure.
are some really practical ways that a teacher or spiritual leader might actually demonstrate that they are leaning into this work, that they are inclusive, that they really, that they're not, that it's not performative. I like this word performative. You know, we're not
Mm-hmm.
just throwing things or people or pictures out there to sort of, oh yeah, you know, we're with you, yay. But to really own it and say, hey, I'm doing my best. I might not be perfect, but I'm doing my best. Let me do what I can to create safety, a safe environment. Let me do what I can to be a part of this. Let me do what I can to listen. What are some of the things that might be helpful in that regard, do you think?
Yeah. I think that I'm so aligned with so much of what you said. And I think that we also, I have seen more and more, there's a the critique that folks have about like performative allyship. And there's lots of different terms we can use, but I think like in a very practical way, the first step, and some might consider this performative, but I think the first step in creating a space is like making sure that you feel that everyone feels seen, right?
Yeah.
So I think if you are a person who has a business and you're soliciting other people to join the business, the people that you are soliciting need to feel like they are a part of it. Right. So I think the most basic way to show some diversity and inclusion is in your imaging and marketing.
Okay.
Um, and like just being able to kind of take a look at what you're putting out and say like, who is my target audience?
Yeah.
Like, and in a very practical way, like who am I trying to attract? Now, if you are trying to attract a certain type of person, then you're going to market to that certain type of person, and you have to be okay with knowing that maybe this certain market is not diverse.
Right.
And if that's your market, if that's what you want, then like don't tout that you are a diverse and inclusive space.
That's
Just
an
say
interesting
I'm,
point. Right.
don't say it.
Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
Because the people who are looking for diverse spaces are going to know that this is not the place for me. right? That like we have built a lens to be able to see, like I have my checkpoints. If I go on your website and I don't see people of color, and it's not a place for me, right? So at least that's like the baseline for me. It's just like, let me see. And then I'm gonna look to see if there's like a diversity statement or some kind of explicit. So like right now, more than ever, I'm looking for to partner with people who have make explicit statements about their beliefs. And I think for white spaces, that's so important because there's comfort in not saying things.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? There's the comfort in saying like, oh, I didn't know, or it is assumed that this is what it is, right? Like I'm assumed, like of course I'm not like a racist person because like we can make those assumptions, but we really can't. So I think
we really can. That's a huge blind spot for white people in the white fragility. You know that we just because we haven't said something doesn't mean it isn't true.
Right. And I think in wellness specifically, like we say so many things that we believe and that we're proud of with ease. We can say how easy it is to like, tap into your breath or the things that there's power in the things that we say and there's power in the things that we don't say. So if we truly believe that we are diverse and everyone is welcome here, then we can say that. And if we can say everyone is welcome, then we can say the ways in which we're going to make sure everyone is welcome.
I think for me, as much as I want to absolutely recommend that people do this, I want to make sure that there's a level of authenticity with it. I remember a couple of years ago, there was a person in the wellness space who was promoting a new course and used an image of basically it was arms holding hands, but there was a white arm, a black arm, a brown arm. And because she was using that to sell her course, it really went upside down for her and she got called out very much. Like, this is you using black and brown bodies for money. And people did not appreciate that. My assumption is that even though she was demonstrating on one hand perhaps something that she intended or might look like diversity, it wasn't authentic because her business wasn't built around that. There was no other diversity in her business. There were no other images that included that diverse representation. And so there wasn't the authenticity behind it. Right. I want to just really tell my audience that when you do this, do it with as much integrity and authenticity as you can.
That's important. So yes, do not stock image photos of different kinds of people to put on your site. And people are going to be able to see if your site looks very white, and then when it's time to sell something, now you have a different image, or if that has not been, or if you have a business that has been, associated with not being a diverse space, then you're going to have to like name something there before you post an image and like hope that it's like everything's okay. Like now we see it. I think, but what I'm referring to is like on a baseline level, and I think it makes the most sense if you are a wellness space, like using images of the people in your space. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And then if you don't have that, if you're like, I'm looking to post some like diverse images on my site from the people in my business. If you don't have it, or if you're like, oh shoot, I don't have this, right. Then you get some. And then and before getting some, you need to spend some time to say like, why don't I? Mm-hmm. Why can I not find and just go to my images of events, of classes? We all sign like media release forms when we enter the wellness space. Sure. And why can't I find a picture of anyone? Yeah. That could show who we are as a business, as an organization, as a space, as a community. And if that is your starting point, then great. Like Absolutely. Now this is the starting point, and then you can adjust from there. So maybe it's not posting all of the like different beautiful colors of skin on your page, but maybe it is a statement to say like, we stand with And I've seen like diversity statements or community statements that sound really good. But I also think right now people of color need to see explicit that you are saying Black people or
Mhm.
Latinx people or BIPOC people, right? But for me as a person, I want to see Black written specifically by itself, and then we can say people of color. And that's my own thing because I think that when we lump in people of color in, like we're not focusing on what is actually like why it's most relevant to say Black people.
Right.
Um, but for me, that is exactly what I'm looking for. And again, we can explicitly say all the things that we do and like sell the magic of who we are in our communities. But if we can't explicitly and proudly also say that we stand in solidarity with people who are experiencing all kinds of trauma and literally murder in the
Yeah.
country, then we don't deserve to have those people in our spaces. And those people
Well,
do
yeah, they're not safe necessarily in those
yeah,
spaces.
they're
They
not
don't feel safe. They don't feel seen. They don't feel included. They don't feel safe. And the kind of work that we do, because it is so spiritual and psychological, absolutely requires safety. Just as we want to feel safe if we're going to a doctor or if we're going to a therapist, we need to know that they see us. We need to know that they see us as a human being, as a person. And if we
yeah.
don't know that, we wouldn't go see those people. That's easy. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's important to know is that like when I'm going into someone's yoga class, I'm not looking to have a rich debate about like white fragility, or I'm not looking to have a debate about like, you know, of current events. But I just want to know that I'm in a safe space. I want
Yeah.
to know that the person who I'm going to is not going to cause me harm or trauma, or like these energies are not going to come in, or like
Yes.
I want to know that I'm okay in this space because there's so much that I have to worry about in my regular life that I
Yeah.
shouldn't have to worry about. I have to worry about being harmed all of the time. So when I'm coming into this space, I'm not looking for microaggression. I'm not looking to be offended. And I'm not looking to question whether or not I should be in this space because my otherness is already telling me that I'm not welcome. And I think for so many people, and I'm speaking from my own experience, that is what I have experienced in the wellness world, not into like not an active like let me be racist to you, but all of the things put together that make me question whether or not this is a race related treatment that I'm experiencing, or
Yeah.
whether or not I am being paranoid, or whether and that is a form of trauma all in and of itself, and that is an experience that nobody needs to have when they're trying to get some deep breaths in, some ujjayi breathing, and some chaturangas, right? Like when I'm
Absolutely.
trying to, be in touch with my yoga and my spiritual practice, I don't want to know if I'm like welcome or not welcome.
That I want to just hang out with this for a second because I think that this is such an important point. This is such an important point. It's not, I mean, it's not just about creating inclusivity. You should never have to deal with wondering if you're safe inside of a space of healing like yoga.
Mm,
I think and I hope that everyone listening, there is a desire to both create a safe space and a healing space inside of the work that they do. Um, we want to do everything we can to never even have our students, our clients question that. So I think that that's a phenomenal call for us to examine ourselves, to examine what our position is, how are we doing this, how can we do better, because that's such an important statement, Eric. Thank you for being vulnerable and making it for us.
yeah, no problem. Thank you for lifting that up, um, because it is important, and I think something else that you can make sure that you do, whether it's online or in person. I know several times me walking into either a new studio
Mhm.
or into a studio that I had been in, I had taken classes in before, um, how I'm greeted is also important when I arrive, either in an online space or in person. But in person, oftentimes I have experienced, I have had to answer the question if this is my first time taking a yoga class or being in a studio far more like so many times, right? And I wonder, like, why are you asking me if I've ever practiced yoga before?
And I'm assuming you're saying that because you see other students coming in and the experience is that they're not being asked, correct?
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah. The one is just like, why do you keep asking me if this is my first time? And I get it if I'm like going to a
Still
new
not my
city,
first time.
right? That I've never been in where I don't have a relationship with the people at the front desk. So this is
Right.
the first time seeing me. That makes sense. Of course,
Yeah.
ask me, make me feel welcome. There are times where I've been in studios where I've practiced several times, but the person at the front desk hadn't seen me, or maybe they have, and they're asking me if it's my first time practicing yoga or, yeah, first time practicing, not first time being at the studio, first time ever practicing.
Interesting.
And so there's one studio in particular. It wasn't where it is doesn't matter, but I'd gone there. I'd been there a couple of times, and I actually wanted to see how many other people were asked if it was their first time doing yoga in general, and no one else was asked that question.
Yeah,
And there
wow.
also weren't any other Black people that came in, so I'm like making an assumption, and I didn't ask, but there were people who would come up to the desk and say, "Oh, this is my first time at the studio, so excited." And they were matched with, "Oh, great, welcome to the studio." But the question of whether it was your first time practicing yoga never came up for anyone other than me.
Wow. So
And I
it was
had
like,
that experience multiple times, right? So
like you're being profiled, Eric.
yeah, right. And the way that that would show up in my practice was that in this studio, I felt like I needed to hit every pose. I needed to be like
Oh,
the
right.
best
Wow.
yogi in the class
Mm-hmm.
because these people think that that this is my first time. So let me
Right.
show you
You
that
don't
this
know what
is not
you're
my
doing.
first, second, or third. And it became an ego thing for me. So it became whenever the challenge was offered, like this is the pose. If you want an extra challenge, you can do this. I was like, oh, I'm on that. Because now I need to show everybody in here that I'm a better yoga practitioner than all of you because you've counted me out. Right. So I had this kind of unhealthy
I hope you showed
relationship.
them.
Well, I did, but also at what expense, right?
Right, exactly.
At the
There,
expense of me not being in
there
my
shouldn't be
practice.
additional pressure on you.
Yeah.
You know?
And that pressure was pressure that I welcomed, right? That I participated in. But it was because this experience that I was having told me that, or my experience
Mhm.
was that I was discounted in a space, so I needed to show my worth by my performance.
Wow.
When
Yeah.
really I need to go into a yoga space so I could turn inward and like
Yes, of
get what
course.
I need in this and make this super personal. But for me, it was more performative because I needed to show them that I could do, like because
Right.
of what I interpreted in my experience. And I'm not saying that's everyone's experience, and I'm not saying like every Black
No,
person
but
in
it's a
yoga
great
class.
reflection to think about that, we often, and when I say we, I mean white people, I think that we often don't see or realize how we might treat people
Mm-hmm,
of other colors or backgrounds or abilities.
mm-hmm.
That, we just don't see it, again, because we haven't leaned against that sharp edge. We haven't really understood that. So that's a really good thing to alert the listeners to alert all of us to, that, our work as yogis, as teachers, as spiritual leaders, unequivocally, is to see every person as whole and complete, period. And if when we look at a person, we see something that makes us think, oh, they're probably not a yogi. What is inside of us that's making us do that? What have we been like? Why are we not seeing them as whole and complete? That's our own inner work to do.
Yeah,
It's important.
yeah. So
Um,
that's one example of, or like another example of like ways you can welcome people
yeah.
in, and like the things you need to be careful about saying or not saying. Um,
Let me
so
ask you something else. When as individuals, yoga teachers, were teaching a class, what in just a class setting from Tadasana to Shavasana might we be aware of or notice in order to do better in this space?
I think just generally, I think generally just kind of like teaching to the practice,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, so removing, not focusing on comments that bring awareness that to things that could be potentially be insecurities, right? So
Right.
I've been in classes where yoga teachers are like, all right, we're gonna do some core work, time to get like beach body ready, in an effort to be lighthearted and like aspirational maybe.
Yeah.
But like, I don't want to be in here like maybe I'm not beach body ready and I'm not
Yeah.
about to be after this class. And
Or
now
maybe
you're
that's not my value, having a beach
maybe,
body is not, it's not the thing that
yeah,
I'm after.
yeah. And what is a beach body? Because my
Right.
body can go to the beach right now. So what is
Right.
it?
Everybody who goes on a beach is a beach body.
So comments like that, I haven't heard any, and not to say that they have not happened, but I haven't heard anything that was like racially charged in a yoga class,
Mm-hmm.
or anything that was kind of like overtly aggressive that I can kind of pinpoint and say do or do not do. But I part of what is kind of a key tenet in my practice and when I'm teaching is to be honest and to name and make connections to like this pose and this practice in real life application. So when I'm talking about kind of taking a moment and closing your eyes to take inventory of how you're feeling and how you're showing up,
Mm-hmm.
for me, that includes what you are bringing into this practice, the parts of you that you have to sit with and hold tightly to that may be trauma or that may be things that you are trying to release. And then in that practice, I'm saying, now we're going to inhale and fill up with the things that we need from this practice, right? If it's discipline, if it's gratitude, like feel that. And when we exhale, we're going to let something go. And for you, you need to figure out what that is, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it is some trauma. Maybe it's an experience. Maybe somebody flipped you off. Maybe like whatever. Maybe your children are getting on your nerves. Like, but what do you need to get rid of or let go in this space, in this moment right now so that you can feel whole? And so that's personal for me. That's not everybody's practice. But when I am saying these things and giving these prompts and finding these connections to real life applications, I am saying it to the people in the room like me who have experienced harm, or the Black people who pulling up to this yoga class or even getting on your mat was a huge, huge task today
Yeah.
because of whatever reason. So I think like something everyone can consider is that when you are giving these prompts and these cues to folks, just know that people are dealing with things that you don't know about. And you
Totally.
yourself are probably dealing with things that you're trying to keep out of this practice. So just extending that same kind of compassion and grace, and in some ways transparency to say like we are all going through some stuff, or like there was another person murdered today. There was another person who had, another thing in the news that we're seeing and experiencing. So if that is impacting you today, then thank you for being here, and hopefully something in this practice can get you through that, right?
Yeah.
So like bringing things like acknowledging the world in which we live, and using practice to speak to that, I think is a wonderful way to make people feel seen, um, with being in doing it in that way. You can be as explicit or as what's the word I'm looking for, like hint at kind
Yeah.
of
Implicit or explicit.
implicit. Yeah, you can be as explicit or implicit as you like when you are, making space for people to feel seen. And like, I see you, like, I know what's going on. I don't know how you feel, but like, I get it. And you're here. And thank you for being here.
I think one of the things that you said there that I'd like to take just a moment with, one of the things that I was always taught and trained in my early days of teaching was that yoga is social activism. That
Mm-hmm.
yoga and its teachings are not meant to pull us away from the world, but to get us into the world. We're not here to duck our heads in the sand and ignore what's happening. it's just like what I mentioned earlier with our own individual spiritual practice can't be that way either. We're not here for spiritual bypassing. We have to do the work, the shadow work, lean into the sharp edges. And that's the same thing. It's the same post that we hold as yoga teachers and spiritual leaders. We are here to hold space for change. We are here to enlighten and enliven. And perhaps sometimes that also means to do our best in educating people or allowing others to help us educate people. And I like what you said. And you said it, honestly, you said it in such a beautiful way that, you know, thank you for coming to your mat today. Whatever brought you to your mat today is amazing. And whether it is in response to some one more thing, one more tragedy that has happened in the news, I thank you for moving towards the mat, and let the practice help you resolve that. I think that's a beautiful way to cue students into the fact that we are, we're educated, we're paying attention, we're listening, we're aware of what's going on in the world, and we are supportive of whatever their battle is. I think about this statement from the Bhagavad Gita, where it says, you know, be kind to everyone you meet, because everyone you meet is fighting an internal battle that you have no idea about.
Yes.
And I think that that's a beautiful reminder.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think you know, just leading with that is a perfect next step or first step, right? Yeah.
May we all lead with that from here on out.
Maybe
Eric, I appreciate your leadership. I appreciate you joining me today and having this conversation. It is so important, and I am deeply grateful for you. I would love for you to share with our audience where people can find out more about you or connect with you or connect with the work that you're doing or go to one of your awesome yoga classes. How do we learn more? How do we find out more about you, Eric?
Yes, well, you'll see much more of me very soon. You mentioned at the start of class, I'm going to be the director of community outreach with you, and going to be working to put some of those things that we talked about into practice here for you and your listeners and your community and our community now, and I'm excited about that.
That's right.
You can also find me. My website is Black Mat Yoga NYC.com. So you can find things there, and I have online classes and online offerings that are also available that you can sign up with online. And then if you want to follow me on Instagram, it's also Black Mat Yoga NYC on Instagram and on Facebook as well.
I like your enunciation there.
I have to say it really clearly because it all can run together. But yes, like a Black Mat.
For the audience who is listening, like, you know, yeah, want to make sure it's there. So I hope that you guys all go find Eric and learn more about what he's doing. And you've got some really cool meditations and things as well on your site, right?
Yeah. And I do some meditation for a couple of other studios also. And I'm working on having more kind of like on-demand online offerings. That's kind of like what's to come. But yeah. There's a lot that you can find, and I'm also started to do, which I'm also excited about, through Black Mat. I've also been able to do some kind of consulting with companies and with other folks in wellness spaces to kind of like figure out what does it mean to be truly inclusive and representative of others, and how can we use mindfulness practices in order to do that. So that's been really exciting to be able to kind of bridge these, you know, worlds that sometimes don't seemingly feel like they're together, in order to make this happen for other people and help them figure out like what their next steps are for their communities as well. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can also find that on the website as well.
Perfect. Eric, thank you so much. I so appreciate your time and all of the wisdom that you shared with us today. And I know that we'll be talking to you again. So until then, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.